this is an important one here. So materials management. So when we are talking about materials management, we want to know, like if I moved here to do this kind of work, the first thing I would do is like research everything. You know, I would want to know what all the recycling options are, what all the reuse options are, how everybody does, how do you haul things, where's the rental companies, everything. I would want to know all that, and I would want to let the government know, you know, maybe let them know that I'm an option so that they can try and, if they agree with what I'm trying to do, maybe they can help send the word out that I'm out here. Try and get that word of mouth going, you know, like you guys talked about. I would be getting that like right away. Because once I get some material, I want to get rid of it. You know, I want to sell it like right away if I could. So there are some helpful resources. You've got Island Green is a resource. There's their website. You've got Build Reuse is the one that created the manual, or I helped them write the manual, and they're a resource. Their website has some resources on it if you want to check that out. There's even a company, or there's a nonprofit that deals with building material recycling. You know, like recycling concrete and recycling drywall and stuff like that. So they have some ideas, stuff like that. So all of us have to decide, kind of like in our business, we all decide what we want to do, like who we want to be. Some of us only want to be a store that it's like a used Home Depot. That's all they do. And other people, all they want to do is be a contractor. They just want to do the deconstruction and they just want to sell the materials off and be done with it, you know. And some of them want to do both, and some of them make furniture out of reclaimed wood. You know, that's part of the reuse industry. They make reclaimed wood furniture. They don't want to take buildings apart or run a store. They just want to create furniture. So there's lots of different things that we do in this business. And then there are companies that support us, like the recyclers and the dumpster companies. But this is all about material management. That's what we're talking about now. And so we visited, who is this? This is on St. John, I guess. Whatever they're called. Huh?
Paradise.
Paradise? That could be, yeah. So it's this lumber yard, building material store. And I mean, like 90% of their stuff was treated lumber, treated plywood, things like that. And I'm like, wow, that's valuable stuff. And but what do they've got a big piece of land, relatively big piece of land, and it's flat, and you know, you get in there and get what you need and get out of there. So I know that there's demand for this material. If I had all this material used, I would probably set the yard up exactly the same way in that same place. I would have cantilevered racking, and I'd have a forklift and that, but it would take, you know, a lot to get that kind of quantity of used building materials. But I believe that it would sell, and you guys believe it would sell, if you have this kind of stuffing used. But you'd still need to have that kind of space. You'd still need to, you know, have that kind of equipment to make it work. And so it is really difficult to do what we do because we sell things for less than new, but handling them and storing them costs the same, you know, so it's kind of hard to believe we do make this work. So we're talking about materials management, and in a place where disposal costs nothing, is what I was told. Now we went to the landfill in St. Thomas, and I saw this equipment. It was under a tarp, and I was like, hey, what is that? What is that thing over there? It looks familiar. And he said it was a scale. You know, scale for weighing trucks that we're driving in. And I was like, oh wow, you guys are installing a scale? And he goes, no, it's been there for 6 years. So it was a scale that costs like $100, I mean, I don't know what it costs, but let's just say it starts at $100,000. And it had been sitting under that tarp for 6 years. But it's hard for me, like I'm so programmed to think about, like, you know, that it costs money at the landfill and here it doesn't. So it's like, it's hard for me to absorb that information. There was a place in Oregon that also you could get rid of stuff for free, unless you were a business. And there was a place in Ohio where it was only like $10 a ton. You know, you could throw away a ton of material for just $10. I mean, it was silly, you know. Apparently they had a bunch of holes to fill or something because they were doing it, you know. And but you know, somehow they have a whole metal recycling operation there at the landfill. And so I don't know why people are sorting metal out for them if it costs the same. I don't know how that works. Maybe if they see some metal, they pick it out. I don't know. But there was a massive amount of metal there, but it costs nothing to throw away metal. So why would you recycle metal? You see what I mean? Like why would somebody recycle metal if it's free to throw it away? I have a different perspective than a lot of people because, like, especially people in construction, you know, because construction people tend to look at things from the beginning of the project to the end, which makes sense, right? They think of a project and they think of a bare piece of ground, and then they have to build a building on it, and there are all these steps they have to take that go from zero to finish, you know, from start to finish. But what I'm really doing is I'm starting at their finish point and I'm going back to zero. Does that make sense?
Yes.
They spent all this time building a building and they left it behind for 50 years, and then I show up and I start at their finish point and I take it all back apart the same way they built it. And so I kind of think of things in reverse, you know. And that maybe when they were building this landfill, or they're putting this together, they said, you know, well, this would be a good place for a landfill. And because it's a big piece of land and, you know, they couldn't think of anything else to do, I don't know. But I think of it like the opposite. I think of like when the landfill is full. Because remember, I have a different way of thinking. I think from the from the future back, and everyone else thinks of today forward. But see, I think of this as like, and I call this Mount Landfill, like it's one of your mountains,
Right.
named. But I don't think of it as today, and I don't think of it as yesterday when I first put it together. I think of it as the future, and I'm like, does anyone really think about like where you're all heading? You know, and I'm not being critical. I'm talking about everybody everywhere. You know, like where are we all heading to? You know, I see the future in my head because I think backwards, and I see this massive pile of garbage. You know, that's nothing. You know, compared, like if you don't have another place to put stuff, so how do you think it's going to end? You know, how's this all going to turn out for you? You know, that pile that was going to be like 10 times higher or 10 times bigger than it is today. You know, maybe. So it's like, and if you keep making disposal free, then why would anyone change? Why would anything change? You know,
right.
Like, are we happy with the way things are going, with sea level going up and temperatures going up? I don't know, but we have to deal with all this material, and sometimes it's really hard to figure out what to do with it or how to make it all work. Because if you're a demolition, remember, you just make a big pile of garbage and you need to throw away a big pile of garbage. But it's not that easy for us. We have goals. Our goal is usually to keep 90% out of the landfill. That is an average job for me, is I try to keep 90% of everything out of the landfill, if I can. So imagine how long that landfill would last if 90% of everything was not brought there, you know, or it was brought there separated, like the metal was already separated, so you didn't have to throw it away because you already separated it out, which is what we do. So we have to consider in our goals, you know, like I didn't just start with 90%. We had to figure out how to do it, how to get faster so that we could get 90% diverted, but we didn't take forever, and we didn't cost much more than demolitions. We just had to get better at what we were doing. And we're trying to pull out as much for reuse. Remember, the goal of deconstruction is, the main goal is about reusing things, you know, because it's so valuable. There's so many benefits to reuse. That's definitely one of the main goals of deconstruction. So anyway, we don't save all the lumber. Like, there are pieces of lumber in a building that are only 2 feet long, right? There's blocking in a wall that's like 14 3/4, I don't know what however long they are, right? The blocking in a wall. Like, nobody's asking me to buy blocks for a wall. So I don't save those, you know? Like, if I can't sell them, then why would I save them? I still recycle them because it's recyclable wood, but I don't save it for reuse necessarily. Because I have to balance how long it takes. Imagine I spend 5 minutes saving a board and I sell it for 5 cents. You know, that isn't good. That isn't worth it. So we have to do. But my thing is, I save so many buildings that I end up saving way more material than anybody else because I have so many buildings that we're doing. You know, and right now they're going to the dump. So, okay. So you like, are we pursuing maximum revenue or maximum recovery? I had some people that were into deconstruction. They did like one building, and they saved 96% of it from the landfill, and they said, this is the way you should do it. And I was like, yeah, but it took you a month to do that, you know. And in that month, I took down 4 buildings, and you took down 1 building. So who saved more from the landfill, you know? When we did the math, I had saved 3 times more material from the landfill than they did. So the thing is, you have to realize that the material flowing into the landfill is like a river. And I remember where I live, there are rivers. I guess you guys don't have so much for rivers, but we, you know, I hang out, I kayak in rivers and things like that, and I understand what it's like. And so it's always flowing. The river flows. You know, you realize, wait a minute, that river, it's flowing at night. It's flowing on Christmas. It's always flowing, right? 24/7. And it's just like that with the landfill. There's always stuff going to the landfill, whether I do anything about it or not, you know. And so if I really focus all my attention on one project, or I spend a lot of time worrying about concrete, or I worry about silt fencing, stuff like that, then I'm not keeping things from going to the landfill at that moment, right? So that's why we spend so much time trying to keep stuff out of landfill, trying to do more buildings, and because we know that if we don't do it, it's going to the dump. That's why we're also trying to get more people to do this, because there aren't enough people doing this here, certainly not, but even anywhere. There's not anywhere in North America where there's enough people doing this kind of work. We don't have anywhere that I know of where we couldn't add more deconstruction contractors. So, okay, now here are the things about material. I was saying the 5% rule, and this kind of applies in this, the 5% rule, where we do these little things that cost us money that are inefficient, and they add up. Even though, you know, they're hard to keep track of, they do add up. We want to handle things as few times as possible. So do you guys see this photo? That's somebody loading lumber into a U-Haul truck. And from the look of it, it has flooring on the bottom and it has lumber on top. But here's the main point. They had to do that by hand. And that's not the easiest thing to do when you look at it, because they can't climb in there. They have to kind of like throw it in there. And hopefully they pulled the nails already, because if you put nail lumber in there like that, it would scratch itself up, but also good luck getting it back out of there, because they would stick together and it would be a tangled mess. But the other thing is that what are their options? Like when they go to get where they're going, they're going to have to unload it by hand, aren't they? They're going to have to unload it by hand. They're going to have to sort it all back out again. And so, yeah, not everybody has a forklift, on the other end. So, but if I was doing this for a living, I would. This is not a good way. This is not a way to maximize efficiency, because you have to load it by hand and then you have to unload it by hand, and it's really going to be a tough. It's doable. It's just like saying, hey, we're just going to put the effort into it and we're just going to tough it out. But most of our groups, they would have a forklift, so they would have a flatbed truck instead of a box truck, and they wouldn't load it like this. They would load it onto pallets at a minimum at the job site, and when they got to where they're going, they would fork those pallets off. And so that's not news to anybody who sells new materials. Nobody that sells new materials would ever do this, right? And so we have to learn from new companies, and but at the same time, we're doing stuff on such a small scale with a low budget that we make mistakes like this. So you see the 5% rule here in play? It's like they made a choice, and they just said, hey, that's the way it is. And they're costing themselves a ton of labor, which means money, and they're having to handle things multiple times. So, if this is a rental truck, that means that they probably took all that wood out and stacked it in the yard, right? And then they rented the truck, and then they picked it all up again and put it in the truck, and then they took it out of the truck and put it on a cart, and then they drove it over, and then they put it in a rack because they didn't have a forklift, So they probably handled it 4 times, and you could have handled it a lot less than that. And so that is not a good way to go. But if that's all you have, that's all you have. And when you're doing it in the beginning, you just have to tough it out. You say, look, I'm just going to work 12 hours because that's what it's going to take. And I know that because I've done that a lot. But we keep the site organized. The last thing you want to do is take that lumber out and set it on the ground, right, because you're waiting for your rental truck, and then you realize that it's in the way of something else you need to do. So now you have to pick it up and move it over here while you wait for the rental truck. It's like, now that's 5 times you need to do. So, okay, so we're trying to be efficient. The thing is, I told you I got paid twice. I get paid to take the building down, I get paid for the materials. But the more I handle the materials, the more I goof around with the materials, the more they get wet, or the more that I handle them with nails in them, the less they're worth, because I'm damaging them every time I handle them. The value of something is attached to the condition of something. Now, I'll tell you something. I'm not trying to make fun of Home Depot, believe me. But I've been to Home Depot, and things that they have on display in the store are damaged. And I'm like, you're trying to sell me a product that's, and the display model is damaged. And that's not very encouraging, right? Because that's something that's not even in use. It's just on display and it's already damaged. So.
Yeah, that's what I tell you. It's just on display.
Yeah. So my thing is, like, value is definitely attached to the condition of something. Like, if something's damaged, then it's not worth as much, and I can't afford to damage my own stuff. That makes no sense. So we try to, prevent damage. We try to, mirrors would be an example. Like, we put padding. We use the carpet padding from the house to pad the mirror because I don't want to break the mirror on my way home. I've done that before. Okay, and weather damage is definitely something, and then of course we talked about the termites. Imagine that you get some wood out that doesn't have any termite damage, and then you store it on the ground somewhere. Like, you set yourself up. That could be worth 0 in no time at all. Especially if they see the termites, then they're gonna freak out, your customers. So this was from the landfill. And there's some, it's not the best picture, but there's a lot of metal roofing there that was perfectly intact. And I was thinking about it, I was like, you mean it blew off in the storm, or somebody ripped it off a building and they threw it in a dump truck and they trucked it over to the landfill and they dumped it on the ground and it was still reusable?
Yeah.
After all that? So, so the question is, the question at that time was, is there anything in the islands that's being thrown away that's reusable? And the answer was yes. We saw it here, we saw it in other parts of the landfill while he gave us a tour of the landfill. And at no point was I ever critical of them, by the way, because I'm not trying to be critical of anybody. I'm just saying, hey, we're talking about challenges and opportunities, right? There may be an opportunity because Kelly and I saw a full dump truck full of wood being thrown away. And I'm not saying I got to see every board, but it looked to me like that was a great opportunity that somebody did take advantage of. So here's another one, remanufacturing, and that's where we had a conversation about that earlier, right? When we mentioned my brother's workshop. But a lot of the businesses now that I help, we make products out of reclaimed materials. Mostly reclaimed wood is involved, And so we take out the wood and we bring it to the wood shop and we make a product and then we bring it to a showroom and we sell the product, Here's a summary of our last section, because we may come back to the final one, which is closeout, but I don't want to miss out on an opportunity doing that last section. Let me summarize this section. You guys know it because you work on this. There are 3 categories of stuff. Our job is to take a structure apart. It doesn't have to be a building. It could be a fence. It could be a bridge. I removed 2 bridges this year already. Not big ones, just small ones. But my job is always to remove something. Not to destroy something, but to remove something. And so when I do that, I generate things in 3 categories. These materials that we're managing, they come in 3 categories. They're either reusable, they're recyclable, or they're disposable. They have to go somewhere. They might go 12 different directions, including back into the owner's storage building. But they do have to go somewhere. So we've got them all. What I'm saying is we take buildings apart and we sort the parts. We sort them into recycling piles, we sort them into reuse, into that rental truck or whatever. We definitely handle things as few times as possible. We try to think through the process. We protect the value of things. There's that idea of the highest and best use. That is, I'm going to give you an example of the highest and best use. And this is something we've been doing for probably 20 years now. If you were to build a wall, you build a house, you build a whole building, I don't know, any kind of building, out of wood. And you of course you build walls and you build floors, and then I come in and I take apart the floors and I take apart the walls, and then I sell the material to someone, and then they go out and they build a wall and a floor. It doesn't really make sense when you think about it, right? You spent all this time and effort building a wall. I spent all this effort taking the wall apart, and then the new guy spent all this effort building another wall. So what we started doing is selling the walls. See? We didn't take the walls apart. We sold them the walls, the intact walls. So now we sold them the floors. We didn't take the floors apart because it's a lot of work to take the floors apart. And then we have to pull all the nails.
Right.
And then we have all this material that's recyclable. We have all this material that's disposable. And that's not good. But then we sell it to somebody and then they have to put it all back together. So they have to go buy new nails and then they have to buy more materials. And it's like, you know what if I just sold you the floor? So somebody comes to me and they said, I need an 8 by 12 shed. I'm going to build a shed in my backyard, 8 by 12. Can you help me out? And I'm like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut a section of floor out of the existing home. It's 8 foot by 12 foot. Sound familiar? That's exactly the size they need. And then I might cut it 8.5 by 12.5. You get it. They're going to have to finish cut it. It's just that how can I do that? Because I have a forklift at the job site, and it can pick up big things, and it can reach out and grab those things. We're thinking. And so now we put that floor on their trailer, because in the real world people use trailers, not here. But we put it on their trailer, and then we sell them 2 8-foot walls, and we sell them 2 12-foot walls, and we put that on their trailer. And now they're well on their way to having an 8 by 12 shed, aren't they? Now those are heavy items. They're heavy items. They're pretty heavy. You know why? Because the walls have the siding on them, and they're all framed in for doors and windows. That's already done, right? I've even sold them walls that have the windows still intact. They're still in the wall. But we're so careful about it that we just pick up the wall and we set it on their trailer really gently, and the window is fine.
So